Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 2 of the Umuco podcast with Alex and Dydine.
Today, we have a wonderful man named André Lovelle joining us to talk about his experiences as a black man in America.
This one is really good, and it's definitely time. How do you say it?
Timely.
It's timely, and it's perfect for what we're going through these days. Also, don't forget to vote.
Yeah, don't forget to vote. Andre really, and I'm not going to give anything away, but like my dad in season 1, Andre also gives a lot of insight into sort of like the political side of being black and growing up in what was called the DMV area, which is the Washington, D.C., West Virginia area, like that area.
Yeah, Baltimore,
yeah. But he gives, just great insight in kind of, his own black experience, but largely the African American experience as it has been, in this day and age.
Yeah, and he's very insightful, and I loved when he shared about how you can be an activist, not even just in your workplace. So that I can't wait for you guys to listen to the full interview. Yep. I'm not gonna spoil it. I would just making you more curious.
Yeah. All right, guys. Please enjoy the episode.
Well, let's start off with who you are, Andre. Kind of like your upbringing. What was it like growing up for you?
Sure. So I was born in Washington, D.C. in the 70s. So I'm a 70s child. And it just occurred to me, honestly, a few years ago that my sister, who's 4 years, almost 5 years older than I, was born only a month after Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Oh, wow.
Throughout the course of my life, I never put that together until very recently. I was born sort of in the aftermath of that, in a predominantly, at least at the time, African-American city,
right?
Washington, D.C., and sort of born, at least initially, into a middle-class existence. My parents actually divorced when I was about 8 years old. So sort of very quickly shifted from sort of standard middle class to sort of a struggle.
Right.
So we were essentially, my sister and I lived with my mom. She raised us as a single mom. We actually ended up moving around quite a bit, sort of throughout the, DC, Maryland, Virginia, sort of metropolitan area.
Right. It's DMV, right?
The DMV. They called it, they started calling it the DMV after I left. So the DMV, that area is home. But we also did, I usually refer to it as a stint. Did a stint in Detroit, Michigan. We lived there for a little while. We sort of, my mom was trying something new.
Right.
But I ended up sort of moving around quite a lot as a direct result of the sort of instant poverty that was brought about by the sort of loss and absence of my father. So, that's the sort of constant moving. In fact, I went from K through 12, so from kindergarten to my senior year of high school, I actually attended 12 different schools.
12, wow.
Wow, I can relate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can. That's a struggle.
There's a lot of moving, a lot of adjusting to, new environments, sort of having to make new friends everywhere you go.
Right.
And that kind of thing. I think that sort of that impacts you. At least it impacted me in terms of my ability to meet and interact with people and make new friends, but also with regard to my ability to say goodbye to people, and sort of, leave situations and not, sort of, take it too badly or carry a lot of emotional baggage because of it.
Right.
So I finished high school in Fairfax County. I graduated from a high school called Jeb Stewart. At the time, it was called Jeb Stewart. Jeb Stewart, if you're not familiar with him, was a relatively famous Confederate general. Right?
Oh, wow.
Since I graduated, actually in recent years, the school's been renamed to Justice High School.
Justice, okay.
So,
Thank God.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, I graduated from Justice High School, not Jeb Stewart.
Gotcha.
Yes. We're going to drink to that.
Right. Right. Graduated from Justice.
Yes.
So after I graduated from high school, I went to undergrad in Minnesota, small liberal arts school called McAllister in St. Paul, Minnesota. Very capital L liberal. So I was just sharing with a friend of mine, my college experience was sort of a very early introduction to what people refer to now as woke culture.
Woke, yeah.
So, I was, during my freshman year, familiarized with sort of the LGBT sort of struggle and community. It was LGBT at the time. The Q's been added since I left,
yeah.
but there were like co-ed, not only co-ed dorms and co-ed floors, but there were co-ed bathrooms where we went, and I was introduced to a lot of sort of different perspectives and cultures and people. And that really shaped sort of my evolving worldview.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
That's, I went to school in West Texas, and the idea of co-ed dorms, co-ed bathrooms, that's wild to me.
What is a co-ed? I have no idea
men
what
and
that
women.
means. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's I'm sure that would have left a lasting impact. And I'm just curious, what did that look like? What did woke culture look like in the
90s,
the 90s,
right?
right?
It was the early 90s, exactly.
Yeah.
So it was, you already have the sort of, madcap independence of, the collegiate experience, no matter where you are, right? But I had that, and it was coupled with this sort of, McAllister kids, these are very smart. Many of them were sort of from wealthier families, very creative, and very much challenged themselves and others. And so what people are experiencing now in terms of sort of trying to acclimate themselves to the sort of emergence of queer and transgender voices,
Right.
and sort of African American voices and women's voices and that kind of thing. I was surrounded by that, pretty much 24/7.
Yeah.
In this really small liberal arts school in Minnesota. So
Yeah, I imagine especially with the small little sub communities within that, it's already sounding like a pretty small community by itself. But I imagine it's it's pretty close knit. You guys can get pretty close very quickly, and then your ideas and your beliefs to sort of build upon them itself from there.
yeah, and there were, without exaggeration, it was about, at the time, probably 1,400 students, very small school, maybe 80 Black students, and only some of whom are, sort of African American. I had friends from Ghana. My roommate, his family's from Nigeria. And so it was, in addition to sort of an adjustment to different people, different non-Black people.
Yeah.
It was also sort of an opportunity to learn about, very sort of diverse, sort of global Black experience as well. So it was an awakening, really.
Yeah, and I was gonna say something like an awakening, and something that has kind of been a topic for us in our podcasts over the last like month or so is the concept of identity. Yeah. And it's very interesting. Like for me, because we just put out a video about identity like a week and a half ago, and for me as an African American Black boy growing up in this country, like identity is it's such an interesting thing. Like, how do you find who you are in this country? I grew up pretty much in my conscious self, like it was like late 90s, early 2000s. That's like where I was a kid. And, it's just interesting because we talk about like the little things that form who we are. And I have my particular things, good and bad, that informed who I am. Dydine, your story is obviously different than mine. But I mean, with you coming to America, you also have your own thing with identity as well.
Yeah.
But Andre, like with you growing up and kind of just what you talked about, did you ever have any issues sort of like finding out who you are, like as a Black man in America?
Very much so. I think we all sort of struggle with reconciling, and when I say we all, I mean sort of Black people in this country who grow up in this country. We struggle with reconciling sort of our developing self-image with a sort of general treatment in society, right? And that kind of throws many of us in a weird space because, there's so many sort of labels with regard to like sort of building your identity to choose from. American, Black, man, woman, gay, straight, that kind of thing. But so it's a challenge to kind of piece everything together and become who you think you're meant to be. But when you add to that the additional complexity of being treated like a second-class citizen in your country of birth, in the country of, in many cases, your parents' birth and their parents' birth, right? We don't have the luxury of sort of transitioning into the mainstream, after our first generation in this country. We sort of are stuck where we are.
Right.
So I think the question that we all sort of continuously ask ourselves about who we are, who am I, right? I think is made significantly more complicated by this sort of treatment that we receive from society.
Right.
If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
No,
it
does.
does make sense.
It does make sense because I think there's something you touched on about moving around and experiencing different cultures, and then you go to college. It was probably a little easier for you to adjust in that environment because you had already went through different cities and states and experiencing different cultures, which is a skill, like you said in the beginning. In some ways it helped, but other ways it didn't. But you built that, I would say, tough skin of adjusting an environment, resilience, and learning about those different cultures. So do you think you had, from college, with all those people you met, how was your, because I'm sure you probably had friends from Africa, how was your relationship there, and how did it impact your life?
For me, it was almost always a pleasant experience, because I didn't approach it from the perspective of someone who was unwilling to listen or learn from others. I enjoyed sort of learning and getting to know people. That's not to say that I didn't have times during which I sort of struggled to connect, but you often hear about sometimes sort of chilly relationship between African Americans and Africans, like are people who grew up in another country who come here. But I didn't experience that. But I did notice, like, there are still observations you make. I did notice that, generally speaking, the way that African students and my African friends sort of responded to this sort of like plight that we have in this country, vastly different from the way my friends who were born and raised in this country did. Generally speaking.
I think you're right, because that's something I experienced when I got here. From my experience, or what I've observed, was also observed. It was also that white people in this country felt more comfortable with Black people from Africa, and I experienced it a lot during my talks, or people openly talk to me about that, and some people would even make comments that the Africans who come here, they're smarter than the Blacks here, and I'm like, that's because the ones you met are the ones who are from rich families that sent to America to college.
Advantaged people.
Yes. So don't. For me, my take on was you cannot judge African people because of the students you met here. Because if you go to the continent, you realize people are people. People are the same, and it's something I always like to have conversations about, because it's important that we come together and understand each other in a way, and understand each other's pain and struggles and joy and happiness. So I like that. You're able to. You did that, and you were young in college to be able to open your mind at that level, that you will listen, and they will listen to you and teach each other.
And not a lot of people get that opportunity, particularly at that young of an age.
No.
And honestly, and it's an experience that hasn't been replicated throughout the course of the rest of my life up until now. It really was. It was almost like a social experiment, you take people from all over the globe, various different perspectives, and sort of put them together, and there was also, I think, things that we could really sort of learn from each other.
Absolutely. Right?
Because I've noticed, like, my friends who are immigrants, they are almost singularly focused on separating themselves, creating a buffer between themselves and sort of the ugliness of racism through the acquisition of education.
Absolutely, yes.
Like, get your education, show that you're better than these people. Right. And I think that's something that a lot of Black folks who were born and raised in this country, I think that's something that, collectively speaking, I don't want to generalize, but collectively speaking, I think that's something that we could sort of borrow from. on the other side, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've heard that like I've had conversations with some of my African friends who are sort of impressed by the sort of history of activism and sort of awareness and sort of challenging of status quo that we kind of take for granted in this country. It's just not something that
yes. So that's
we're
something
unaccustomed to.
Yeah. So I always talk about it with you about how I found it so when I got here and learning the whole history of America and Black people, what they went through for hundreds of years and what they were able to accomplish. I don't know how I can it's literally, it's almost impossible to imagine that the amount of accomplishment the people overcame and what happened to them and where a Black person stands now. Especially, I feel like, especially in Africa, the countries that were colonialized, they weren't colonialized for more than 50 years. But mentally, a lot of Africans are still colonialized mentally. And it wasn't even for over 50, 60 years. But the damage, mental damage that was done is still there and we're still recovering from it. Yeah. And then I get here, I learned, literally, one of my friends, Michelle, you met her, she sent me a birthday card, and on the birthday card, there was, the art was a Black woman. I had never seen it before.
Get out of here.
No. In Africa, we hang art, white people. You have children. Yes, you have
like
children.
White Jesus. Yeah.
White Jesus. Yeah. You have, you give birth and your friends give you cards that have white babies on it.
Right.
So it was those things that I was like, oh my God, this is something. It was just almost like opened. That means I was mentally colonialized. Yeah. I didn't see it as wrong until I saw something else. So there's so much we can learn from each other.
So interesting.
Yeah. But that's
so interesting.
So interesting, yeah.
Yeah, like that sort of the history that actually started, a lot of people identify as sort of civil rights era with the sort of, like the sort of collective, like cultural awakening, sort of Black pride and everything. But that actually started well before that.
Yeah.
Right? So, it really took hold and became more popularized during the 60s, but that started, really early. So we've actually spent sort of decades as a collective, with varying degrees of success, but sort of establishing a culture of sort of pride and sort of resistance to this idea that we're inferior.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's still like we're still grappling with it. It's it's a long constant
journey.
struggle.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. We see it. I mean, it's evident every day. Like we look out the window, we look at our phones. We see struggle and that's and we've talked about the George Floyd incident, and it's nothing new, but it has once again put our struggles in the limelight. For but a moment, like the media does, but it's a almost perpetual thing, and I think there's still progress. I mean, there's progress that has been made, obviously, but it's very evident that there's still tons more stuff to do.
Oh, there's so much more work to do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And progress is never permanent.
Right. People
assume that you sort of get to a level, right? Once you level up, you're going to stay there. But, what I've noticed, and if you look at sort of the history of this country, with any group that's sort of on the outside looking in, minorities, particularly Black people, but, other minority groups, women, gaze. Anytime there's the perception of achievement, like large scale achievement from those groups, even if it's symbolic, it's very quickly followed by a backlash, a period of backlash.
Right.
Most recently, with the election of an African American president, and sort of the pride that we took collectively from that, he was very quickly replaced by, what we have now, right? I think we're currently in a period of backlash. So, we have to remain vigilant. Those of us who care about, moving forward, you have to keep going.
Yeah, I agree with that. I haven't really thought about that in that sense. Yeah. But also, it is because I think back to 2020 or 2008, right, when Obama got inaugurated. Yeah. There was, and I was in high school at the time. There was so much. There's the celebratory, like the energy
all over the world. I'm telling you, every Black person all over the world were celebrating.
Yeah.
Like we were sitting on TV watching.
Right.
Literally.
It's like Christmas.
It was like a Christmas
for a lot of people. But I also remember there being, because Obama would say like, this is just the first step. I mean, not verbatim necessarily, but he was always cognizant of like, I'm here, but there's still stuff that we need to do. And I got a sense of like, we were like resting on our laurels. We were just kind of like, okay, we made it.
Yeah. It's almost like a taking of,
now we're good. But it's like you said, like this is just a necessary step, but there are several steps that need to follow this for longer lasting permanent change.
Yeah, for future generations.
Right. Strengthening the foundation.
Yeah. And people need to also, I think, more of us who do care about progress need to realize that backlash is coming. It's inevitable. Right? Like shortly after the Civil War, a period of Reconstruction, during which Black people, like Southerners, experienced sort of unprecedented, economic and intellectual growth. Widespread government representation. In a period of Reconstruction, you read about it. Remarkable time in Black life.
Right.
And about maybe 8 years it lasted. And then right afterwards came the Ku Klux Klan. And sort of, public lynchings of Black people, Black codes, and, that kind of thing. So like the infrastructure for Jim Crow was built and established during, sort of that backlash period. So I think we just have to really not only stay sort of vigilant, like I said, and sort of, but also we need to really be aware that that backlash is coming.
Right.
It always has. It always has.
Yeah. That's oh man, it brings me back to Newton's 3 laws.
What is that?
One of them is for every action there's an equal opposite reaction. That is that's very evident. That's what you're talking about. Like we push this way, there's going to be backlash the other way. But I think it's important, like you said, to realize that. Now that I'm thinking about it, to realize that backlash is coming, and to kind of fortify yourself so the backlash doesn't push you back 2 steps, like 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Exactly. Like and that's the thing, like, exactly what you say. We need to fortify ourselves, and just prepare for it, and realize that the work is continuing. It will never end.
Right.
Not for us, not for our children.
Andre, so you worked with children. You were an educator. What inspired you to be an educator? How did you end up in the teaching career?
I think the thing that led me to to realize that I wanted to do that for a living was having a history of tutoring through middle school. I think I started sort of tutoring English and math in my 8th grade year, all throughout high school, all throughout college, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
You were already working when you were how old? When you were
You said eighth grade.
I was probably like 13 years old when I started tutoring kids from a local grade school. And, kids are just little adults, man. Everybody, we all want to know. We're all responsive to when people care about us, when they show genuine concern and generosity and love. Man, we respond so well to that. Kids respond so well to that when they know you genuinely care about them.
Right.
Are willing to invest the time. Aren't put off by the childish things that they do. Like you just enjoy them as people.
Right. Right.
I saw that early on, and I think that that sort of left such an impression that I think it pushed me towards a career in education.
How was it? How was your career there? Or was there something an impression that was like I wanna how do you always say it? I'm digging for something.
You're digging for a story.
Dig away.
For a story there. Yeah. I am. So you taught you said is MS-13 for 5 years.
Yes, there was a fairly significant MS-13 presence throughout the school that I worked in. So, I'm not sure if your listeners would be familiar with MS-13, but basically it's a gang from, I think, originated in El Salvador. MS, I think, stands for Mata Salvatrucha, and it is a notorious gang. And I taught kids who were second, third generation gang members, and though a lot of those of them who weren't gang members were sort of gang adjacent.
Gang adjacent.
It was just sort of what they grew up in and around. And that's a completely different life. If you're involved in that, you are not as likely to respond to a Shakespearean sonnet as someone who doesn't have those really significant real world concerns daily. So and I think when we spoke before, I mentioned to both of you, one of the kids who was in my class, his name was Luis, and Luis, just like a wonderful kid, funny, really sort of like he and I've noticed this with a lot of those kids, very sort of well-developed sense of self, right? It's very self-possessed, very sure of himself, very confident. And, one day, it was a Friday, in fact, he and I were talking, and we had a staff versus students basketball game that we had every year that was scheduled for that Monday, the sort of the next Monday evening.
Right.
And that Friday, he got into an altercation with some other kid, and he shot him in the chest, and the kid died. And that was the last time we saw him. He was sort of, officially a murderer. And his life changed just like that overnight.
Wow.
You know.
Wow. Was it
Now
difficult?
that was an unusual circumstance, but the threat of violence
Yeah.
or some sort of severe, like something severe happening around was always there. It was ever present. So in that environment, maybe the focus isn't going to be on, you know, Walt Whitman.
Right. And you imagine you have to change your curriculum around a bit, maybe. I mean, how do you 'cause I don't like the term at risk.
Yeah.
At risk kids. I think it just kind of throws a label on them. But I mean, how do you relate, and how do you cut through some of that? Like you said, very real world, those issues. You know, how do you relate to them as humans?
I think for me, it was through having continuous, honest conversations with them.
Yeah.
I never pretended as if what I was instructing them on was the most important thing in the world. I never pretended that I didn't understand, what they were going through. One of the things that I would tell kids is that I don't think it's fair that they often have to make decisions at this very early age that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives.
Right. Yeah.
It's deeply unfair. But, that's how our society operates. And so, I related to them just through the recognition of what they were experiencing and how systemic and unfair it was. But also, I shared with them to the degree I could, sort of my love of language and, music and education, that kind of thing. But I also didn't take it personally if they weren't especially interested in what I had to teach them in class.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Man, that's
That
tough.
yeah.
And I'm sure it lends even more perspective than you already had.
It did. One of my biggest takeaways, I think, from my experience with that is that academic performance is such an extremely poor measure of intelligence.
Right.
Often kids who grow up in that environment, they express their creativity and their intelligence and humor, ingenuity, assertiveness, like their self-determination in ways that tend to be overlooked at best and criminalized at worst. Those same traits would be cultivated in wealthy kids or in white kids. They actually might even be identified as leadership qualities, right?
It's crazy how you can
and
flip
a
that
lot of
coin.
those kids, sorry, you
No, I was gonna
you were
say,
about to say
it's crazy how you can flip that coin just based off of certain backgrounds. White kids, leadership qualities, maybe Latino, Black kids, potentially problematic.
There's a greater tendency to when a child who isn't seen as disposable exhibits those traits to sort of steer that child away from the consequences of those actions,
Right.
and to sort of involve that child in things that might nurture the sort of restlessness or curiosity. And a lot of times poor kids, minority kids don't get that opportunity.
Yeah. Right.
Absolutely. Was there was your time there teaching and getting to know those kids in the 5 years and seeing their experiences and what you went through growing up, was that the inspiration for Blaxplanation?
It definitely, I think those things are definitely a driving factor.
Yeah.
But also, there's like what you all are doing with this podcast, what we do when we write songs, or when we express ourselves in different ways, or we want to be heard, right?
Yeah.
There's an inherent human need to say to the world, I was here, I matter, and we see it being expressed all different sorts of forms, like Twitter. People want to be heard, and in large part that was also sort of a reason why I started writing. I wanted to be read. I wanted to share my ideas with as many people as possible.
Man, yeah. So can you, we talked about it before, but can you just kind of briefly explain like where Blaxplanation came from and kind of the origins?
And what it is about.
Yeah. It's kind of like the common theme with it.
Sure. So I've always, not always, but probably my entire adult life, I've tended to over process or over engineer, think too much about things, look for angles that might not even be there. So I thought one of the ways I could sort of manage that in a healthy way was to write. Now, the name Blaxplanation, that was actually born years before I started the blog at McAllister. My ex roommate, his name was Okanola. He's Nigerian, and we were all sitting in the cafeteria one evening, just kind of doing what we would do, sort of giving each other a hard time,
right.
Talking, laughing, and there was another friend of ours who was sitting with us, and he started sort of opining about why he thought something was occurring, right? And it was just gibberish, just pure nonsense, right? And my friend Oak said, jokingly, like, this dude's giving us a Blaxplanation. That doesn't even make sense, right? But in that moment, what became very crystal clear to me was that the term Blaxplanation is just brilliant. It was brilliant and had more gravity and meaning than Oak realized it did at the time. So when I started writing again, I was trying to think of a name, and I was like, that's it.
Explanation.
That's it. Blaxplanation.
Was there like if you look back, you wrote it in 2000. You were writing about these articles back in 2008, 2005.
Yeah, even before. I think I started the blog in maybe late 2006. Because I had, been writing with some momentum when Obama was elected. I wrote a lot about him when he was running during the Democratic primary.
Right.
I wrote a lot about his campaign when he became the Dem nod. I wrote about sort of I think there was this spirit of, hey, Obama leaned very heavily on the word hope. You remember that was sort of beautiful. Core to his campaign's hope, right? And it's easy to be cynical about politicians, right, and their catchphrases, whatever they choose to adopt. But hope was an absolutely accurate descriptor of what was going on with regard to him and his campaign.
Right.
And when he emerged as a legitimate, like serious candidate, I have never seen anything like how that impacted people, and not just African Americans, but and like you said, globally Africans, but also other minority groups, women.
The tears of
He
joy.
had, such an effect
It was.
on people that it was, it was glorious to see.
It was glorious.
It really was.
Yeah.
I mean, you've since stopped writing, or what I assume you've stopped writing. Do you plan to go back to it at any point, or to like pick it up in another fashion in a podcast maybe?
We can use some hope and a black explanation right now.
Yeah.
I have. So I've recently started writing again. You know how it is with anything that you haven't done for a while. You got to kind of knock the rust off a little bit.
Right.
Kind of work through the kinks, but there's a muscle memory there. And so it's coming back, right? Sort of the rhythm of writing is coming back. And this actually, this thinking about sort of having this discussion with you all, being encouraged by what you were doing with your podcast. You may know a fellow named Harry Anderson.
I do. Yeah. Very
We've
familiar.
heard of him.
Yeah. He and I, and this is a friend that I made. Your dad, for folks who don't know. He's a friend that I made. I think it was around 2014. He and I met just on the job, and we've had just recurring, very serious discussions just about life, history, so Black pride, and that kind of thing. And we had talked very seriously about starting a podcast. So this is much like sort of my experience at McAllister was an awakening. Sort of, this last, a couple of weeks has been an awakening for me because, I still like the hunger is still there to kind of get some stuff out there.
Right.
Because,
And doing it on Twitter, just won't cut it.
Right.
Oh yeah, you're in social media now.
Was it 240 characters? Is that it?
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, it's not
it's not helpful.
It's perfect to insult people.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
You
like a
get
perfect
in, you get out
structure
real quick.
to call people names and say how stupid they are.
Oh my God. Oh yeah. Tell that to.
But to
our
express
president.
complex ideas in a certain way, it's not really for that.
But to be fair, though, there are some really serious, profound thinkers on Twitter. I follow a few, so I want to be clear. I'm not disparaging Twitter users. But,
Yeah, I feel like we're in the world of social media. There's information all over. It's just in your face. Everything is in your face. But I feel like it's our responsibility to filter through and just grab those information that are important to us and positive, and not the information that they're going to drain us for like weeks.
Right.
You gotta be careful
Right.
what you consume on social media because they can get blasted at you real quick. And
Especially for younger generation right now, people have so much depression just because what they see on social media or how they want to present themselves to the world, and
Yeah. The sort of the freedom and often the sort of cruelty that comes with anonymity is embedded in it, right? It's a part of it. We can't ignore it.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that it's such a like it's a limiting way to not only express yourself, to sort of learn about things, because it's so easy to build like a virtual echo chamber in Twitter. By design, you sort of you improve your experience by following people. You're more likely to follow people with whom you agree. You know, and so those people, when they're added to your timeline, all you're seeing is sort of these regurgitated opinions, things with which you already agree in the first place.
Right.
And it's sort of cyclical.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, then,
It is.
like you said, like an echo chamber, and the more you see people who agree with you, the more little hits of dopamine you get. You're like, oh yeah,
right?
I think about
That's
that
exactly
too.
right.
Yeah. So
Exactly right.
Yeah, you got to be careful.
Is and you get these likes, like these little red hearts, man, and they should mean like nothing, right?
Yeah.
But they have such like their psychological currency, man. Like they have, you know, such significance to you. Like you said,
Absolutely.
you hit the nail on the head, man. It's like you get the dopamine from sort of continuously receiving them.
I'm just curious. I mean, this kind of popped in my head. To what degree of activism do you find yourself engaging in, like nowadays? I mean, you have kids. You know, you're a grown man. You have things to take care of. I don't imagine you're, you know, marching in the streets like some people. But that's only one form of activism, right? So, like, what do you consider to be your own way of expression?
Yeah, I think you said, you took the words out of my mouth. That my interpretation of activism has changed, right?
Right.
And it may be as a result of my being a little more self-serving, right? Like you said, I'm you know, you put it nicely. You said I'm a grown man. I'm an older guy, right? And you know, hard to march in these streets and with a raised fist when you got to knock this mortgage out.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's so with those sort of increased responsibilities, I've had to shift kind of how what I think of as activism. So one of the things that I've been engaging in sort of informally is sort of career development with other like African Americans who are in the corporate workspace.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, I've sort of developed like countless sort of like resumes for people. I've given sort of more formalized career advice and direction for people. I've encouraged people who may not think that they're ready to take the next step in their career, who may not think they're ready to enter management, to sort of do so and give them advice about that kind of stuff, because it's close to home, right? I'm working in corporate America, have been for years, have learned sort of a great deal about how to successfully navigate it. So, you know, to me, it just seems befitting to sort of pass that along in ways that benefit people who, you know, may have sort of a blind spot with regard to themselves and how to sort of, you know, move ahead.
Yeah,
that's amazing, because you're doing it in service. You're giving, you know, you're in service for others, and that's how you're uplifting our community. And I like that, because I was watching this video on YouTube, I think it was BuzzFeed, and this woman, she said she was the first person in her family to have even got to 2 years of college. And she trained herself, I think she's from somewhere in Tennessee, and she trained herself about finances. So she learned about finances, and she was able to get out all the dates and whatever. And she trained everyone in her family, all her friends. She gave that information to them and saved them from, you know, trouble. And, you know, that's like meaningful and important information.
truly life-changing activism, you know?
Yes. Yeah. So that's
and
what
it's close to home. Yeah.
It is. It is. Yeah. So when you say that, it's an activism, not just using words, but also being in service for those people, and you're changing their lives and lives of people that are gonna come from them. You know. So yeah.
That's
Because some
that's
people
profound.
don't. It is.
No, that brings something else to my mind. It's like what we're talking about now is just doing what you can, like recognizing your strengths. You know, not everybody needs to be, like we said, marching. I mean, again, that's one way of activism, of showing your support. Yeah. But I mean, recording a podcast, writing blogs, helping people in corporate America.
Yeah.
You know,
educating ourselves, reading about our own history.
Be on a more micro level. That's not necessarily broadcast as much, but can be just as, if not more effective in the long run.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing what you can where you are.
Right.
Yes.
And have much more sort of far-reaching impact than, you know, taking it to the streets. Right. Not that belittling, that activity.
No.
I think there's a space for agitation, like public agitation, but for me, mine sort of takes a different form.
Form, because I think protesting is good because you can get those things that have been especially systematic oppression. All the things are systematic racial issues. Some of the things can just change right away, make orders and put things in place, but personal growth and community growth, that's on our part. And it's also something that we can also keep pushing. And if we have this big movement, like you said, in the 60s, what happened, then there was a backlash. I think the background work is the one that's going to protect us from, like, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. So in a world that in a world chock full of like systems that dehumanize people, it can be revolutionary just to acknowledge the existence of others, right? One thing that I noticed is missing from a lot of corporate America is sort of, establishing the ability to establish like meaningful connections with coworkers.
Yeah.
In so many places, there's such an extraordinary climate of fear that exists, and people sort of retreat inwards, and we become isolated and disconnected. And these are places we spend 8 to 12 hours at a day.
Yeah.
Right.
So just connection. That's I think sort of what activism, like the overall purpose of activism.
Yeah.
Is connection.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another form of activism. I like that. Yeah. And a lot of people are actually, the woke people, the allies, they are actually making, because I use the word ally.
It's just funny. Like it's just such a that word is really entered the national consciousness.
It's really it's a small word, but it's really, really big if people looked at it in the way, because for myself so back in Rwanda, I like to always reference to that, even though it doesn't, but when when in a society, when you see the group that is oppressed, even if you're not part of it, sometimes when you care so much for them, you also become a victim of what they're going through. Yeah. So I see it as being an ally is taking a huge responsibility, and especially when we had genocide back in 94. The Hutu families, there are people who saw it wrong and they decided to hide some of us, and a lot of the people that survived during the genocide, it was because there was a group of Hutus who did not agree with what their race was doing. And they literally put their lives in line to save a few Tutsi survivors in Rwanda. And they were allies, and a lot of them died just doing that.
Oh yeah, being moderate was essentially criminalized, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Did you see that?
Oh,
You
gosh.
saw that in the it was criminalized, and the prime minister was killed with her children, and she
Yeah.
was Hutu, just because she did
Oh,
not
gosh.
agree with what was gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I feel like those are moments people should see, that when things like that are happening, or things like these are happening in our society, the side we take really change, like small decisions you make or one word you say, and especially when there's pandemics that are happening right now, or even just simple things with the unemployment that is going on right now, eviction that's happening. I think especially when you have power, even if you don't have power, but just speaking up for those things that are affecting humanity as a whole.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like the being an ally is just seeing what's going on wrong, even if it does not affect you,
Or apply to you.
apply
directly.
to you, but knowing that you have the power to do something.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I saw it here when people were mumbling. I know you.
No. You're.
I saw it here when George Floyd was killed on camera, and those are the things that we know that happens all the time. And some people, it was shocking, and it was shocking that almost like they've never heard of it before, and they are Americans, and people cry the first time about a black man being killed, and other people are scared, terrified. I was one of those who were terrified, but I got to the point where I reminded myself that we are not alone in this. And even if there's not enough allies, we are going to work hard to get more allies. I feel like what this did was putting, what's going on in the face of people. There was no way to hide from it.
Yeah.
And then
You couldn't, if you had any modicum of decency, you couldn't see what was happening to George Floyd and write it off or blame it on him or excuse it. Now, some people have, but if you're a decent person, you couldn't explain that away.
Right.
No, not at all. So when we saw that, it was almost like it took us a time to even know what to say about it.
All right, to speak out publicly.
To speak up, not even to speak up, even for us to have to get an understanding of what just happened.
It's a process it yourself, yeah.
Yeah, and then it took us weeks, and then people would call our friends, white friends would call us. It was like, oh, how are you doing? And we didn't know how to respond to that. It was just like a really, really an interesting moment.
It was challenging as well.
It was really challenging.
I mean, I personally, I got like annoyed.
Yes.
All these people. I mean, I know they didn't mean anything by it, but
Yeah.
I guess that's out of curiosity.
They're trying to,
yeah. But we got to the point where we remind ourselves, like, hey, we weren't able to know how to articulate what just happened,
Right.
And we are firsthand people. We're black, where people can experience it, and at any time. So the person who would not experience it, who doesn't know what that type of injustice looks like or feels like, it would take them longer.
I was thinking, like, those calls from allies, like we all got those, right? Like we all got those calls, and the sort of theme, at least from the people, the multitude of people who reached out to me, right? Which in itself, honestly, I mean, I'm kind of being facetious and everything, but it was it was good to know that despite the fact that they didn't know how to help, they wanted to.
They wanted to.
Right.
Yes.
And that was the underlying.
That was good. And so, whenever someone asked me, like, how can I help? I told them, right? I said to my white friends, leverage your privilege, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have resources just by virtue of being white in America. You have resources and access that I don't,
right?
That people like me don't. Please use those resources to improve the situation, and to have difficult, challenging conversations with other white people, right?
Yeah.
I'm not very often in circles in which white people speak openly about how they feel about black people, right?
Yes.
I'm not invited to those conversations.
No.
If you are,
no,
speak up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Advocate for justice amongst those white folks who may feel differently.
Absolutely. Like Alex said, you're a grown man. That comes easy for you. For us, it took us
just kind of to speak out.
I'm just I'm done with
See,
you guys.
I would think
Speak out.
you guys are young. You should be like firebrands, But I think most you guys, you're both like reasonable, thoughtful people. And I'm somebody who has always been impatient and just kind of spouts off. So, I don't mind saying it, but
Yeah.
I wish I were a little more, I wish I had more of an ability to sort of manage that and pull back.
No, we need people like you.
I just knew that we wouldn't soon get this opportunity again. Right?
No,
it's already, we talk about allies. We're already seeing sort of this ally fatigue kind of play out. Like we're seeing sort of decency fatigue. In much the same way that people don't want to stay within social distancing measures. They're getting tired of it. They're getting tired of being safe.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Same thing with the allyship in a lot of cases. They're like, all right, let's move on.
Right.
Let's move on. This is
But the thing is, well, I was remembering, I told you about this. I'm a big LeBron guy, by the way. I'm a big basketball LeBron dude, and he recently spoke up in like a press conference talking about how people like to think that Black Lives Matter is a movement for Black people, right? Like it's just like a passing thing, when in reality it's a everlasting thing. Like it's something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, like year in, year out. It's not just like a passing fad. So
it's not a snapshot.
It's not a snapshot. And like kind of to your point, it's not something that we can afford to become impatient with or get tired of and kind of write it off like, okay, that was that moment, we'll move on to the next.
No, we walk with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's baggage that we carry every day,
every single day,
and it's it's up to us and our allies to continue the push.
Allies. I'm really appreciative of those people who are getting out of their comfort zone, in service for others.
I also am a LeBron guy. I love LeBron.
Good. It's good to hear.
He doesn't subjugate his responsibility as a citizen to his extraordinary basketball talent.
Right.
And also, you think about it. This cat, he's been famous since he's 13 or something.
Yeah. Really.
If I were famous when I was 25, I'd probably be dead now. You know what I mean? Like this guy's rich and famous since then, and he's handled himself so remarkably, just personally and professionally.
And he's a family guy too. That's what
I think it's
appreciate
testament
about
to
him.
the kind of the circle that he keeps around. With that sort of success at such a young age, so many people can go so many different directions. But he seems pretty grounded anyway with his family and his close knit circle.
Yeah, he's. I think he's to me he's an inspiration. I love his activism. To me, he's just a good dude.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, big
good dude.
Big dude. We saw him. We saw him once and his family.
Oh yeah.
You met him in person?
Opportunity.
Yeah, we were at work where we were working before.
Our former job. Yeah, we had a whole bunch of celebrities
coming
come through.
in.
And, do the
Okay,
thing.
that's right. I forget you guys are in LA, right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
It's all right.
It's
nice.
all right.
Not bad.
It must be nice.
It is nice.
Yeah.
I mean, now we've been in the house for since March.
Yeah, for 4 months. So we don't really experience LA as it is, but we experience the four walls that
we go to the beach once in a while.
Yeah, here and there.
But I still much rather be sequestered in the house in LA
Really?
than in North Texas.
Oh, it's hot.
Yeah.
It's hot there. I don't. That's the one thing I don't miss. I don't miss the heat.
LA is
about
really,
North Texas.
really expensive. And we sometimes think about it, but we're like,
yeah.
LA's too nice.
Yeah, it's all right.
You live
It
small,
is
but
just
in LA.
culturally, it's just so different. Like this place culturally is I've been here 16 years. I share with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's taking some getting used to.
It's taking. That was a sad face.
Yeah. Dallas is its own brand of culture.
Different, man.
That's the same with Alex. That's how he's like. I liked it.
I have love for Dallas.
Yeah, I
do
liked
love
it
that
when I
city.
was there.
And it's not just because I grew up there, but yeah, I mean, moving to LA a couple years ago was culturally. It wasn't like I was so protected or conservative in Texas, because I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have moved out here. Like I yearned for more, culture, more interaction, this and that. But I don't know. I mean, Texas is Texas.
It's just different.
Yeah.
It's just different. Like I think the biggest sort of shift from where I grew up on the East Coast, so Mid-Atlantic, to here, it's easy to sort of describe it in general, like generically as cultural, but I think with regard to, obviously the politics are vastly more conservative here and sort of more widespread and more publicly shared, right? I expected that. What I was surprised by was the sort of the seeming kind of lack of solidarity amongst the sort of Black people here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I noticed that. So friends and I have friends who, sort of transplants as well. And, we've sort of, talked about it repeatedly. Like there's just this sort of void with regard to Black connection. And this area, they try to fill that void with religiosity.
Oh, so you only see each
not a
other
replacement.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I've always been curious about that because I've only known Texas for the most part in my growing up and in my youth.
Yeah,
so I
family.
never had an outsider's perspective. I mean, I had friends from different states, different parts of the world, but I mean, just hearing you talk about it, hear about you and your fellow transplants, it's like the kind of conversations I would have with people who I knew from Texas who were out here, So, I never was able to articulate anything that you had just said, while I lived in Texas.
It's just so interesting because, well, first of all, Texas, I kind of tease Texans about this. It's not the real South, right? It's more like the South or West, right?
Kind of South.
It's sort of different in terms of the people and the attitudes. It's a little different from like the East to South,
right,
Southeast.
Your Georgia, Louisiana, that sort of stuff.
Exactly, right? Like people who have been there for, hundreds of years, who have basically established a cultural infrastructure. That's not really in place here. It's more sort of, there's not as much of a foundation here for that kind of cultural activity.
Right.
But also, so Harry Anderson, he introduced me to a book. It's called The Accommodation.
The Accommodation.
It's written by actually a white writer who lived. I'm not sure if he's still with us, but lived in Dallas, and he wrote a book about race relations in Dallas during the 50s and 60s. So interesting to read. It's out of print, difficult to find, but it's got sort of an underground following. I 100% know for a fact that your father has a PDF copy of it.
Oh, I'm sure.
You wanna learn about sort of, like, you want to make sense about why this place is the way it is, especially for Black people. Read The Accommodation, because he explains how there was strife, the same kind of strife that was occurring everywhere else in the country. Like there were regular bombings in the Dallas area. Sort of racially driven, bombings. And when sort of civil rights movement that was touching most of the American landscape during that time, the city architects and officials of Dallas made a concerted effort to prevent that from coming here. So it never really, like, the civil rights, people don't really think of it in these terms, but civil rights educated America. And Dallas was intentionally sort of prevented from receiving that education. And the results are sort of what you and I have noticed. It's so interesting.
That's fascinating. I'll have to ask him about that. The Accommodation?
It's called The Accommodation. I think the author's name is Jim Schutz. I think that's how. I'm not sure about the pronunciation. It's Jim Schutz. He used to write for a local publication, newspaper in Dallas, and he wrote The Accommodation, and it is illuminating. But again, it's out of print. But you let me know if your dad can't find his version of it. I'll email it to you. I know I have it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'll definitely read that.
Matter of fact, I'll just email it to you anyway.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Okay,
if you have
cool.
it. I would like to read it too.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Wow. So do you think you will move out of Dallas in your lifetime, during your lifetime? To LA?
Definitively, yes.
100% yes.
As soon as my son graduates. And I told him he's lucky. He's lucky we're holding out for him to graduate. I don't want him to have that moving experience that I had.
I see. Yeah.
As soon as he graduates, we are on the first thing smoking.
Wait, which direction? Going east or west?
Doesn't even matter. I would love to live like you guys. You said it's so expensive where you are.
It is.
It's but each time I've been out there, I love it. I love that area.
I think the culture is I've traveled with my talks for the last 5 years all over the United States, and I first didn't know that I was going to live here. I thought I was going to live in Chicago. That's where my job was when I came here.
Oh, okay.
And then we had meetings here because I came here in 2014. And I had meetings for like 3 weeks here in LA. And then after 3 weeks, I was going to spend 3 to 6 months in Chicago.
Yeah.
So I land here and I look around. I was like, I told my boss, my work is on a computer anywhere, but I think this is my world.
In LA, yeah.
I was supposed to live here.
Yeah.
It was meant to.
They made a mistake by sending you there first.
It was literally a mistake. And I came to Austin, Texas, for 2 months, and I was like, no, I traveled
no.
around, and I just couldn't. I didn't really like other cultures. It's not even just the cities. There's a culture here. The culture here can be extreme, but you just have to find the right people.
Right.
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 Yeah.
I believe there's something here in this city for everybody.
Yeah, for everybody. True.
Yeah.
That's what my friend, one of my best friends is in Dallas. She's from Rwanda. She came and stayed with me for 2 months. And she was like, oh my God, Dydine. Because she was in Tennessee, and then, she was in San Antonio, Tennessee, and then Dallas.
Oh.
I know. So she comes. I know, she still doesn't like LA. She says that it's expensive, but she loved everything else. She was like, oh my God, you have beautiful people here. Everyone is smiling. I have no issues.
In the 3 places she went, oh my gosh.
I know.
Like, that's just awful. I feel badly for her.
Well, she still likes it. She says it's cheaper, and she doesn't like the struggle, living in the big cities.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. To be fair, Dallas has been good to us, especially when we moved here 16 years ago. Super affordable.
Yeah.
Much more so than now. It's allowed us to comfortably raise my son, and he's received a good public education. And he's made some good close friends and that kind of thing. So it's been good to us, but it is absolutely time to go.
What I noticed in Dallas, though, people are patient. For some reason, I think people were nicer. I don't know. That's what I felt when we went to restaurants or when we went to the movies, theater.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe the customer care there is nicer. I don't know. Customer service.
Southern hospitality.
Yeah, because with my accent, most people don't have patience with me when I go order something. Out here.
Really?
Yes, there's long lines all the time, and they can't get my name right, and they,
That's just a bill, because your English is flawless. You're extraordinarily easy to understand.
Oh.
They just don't like the fact that you have an accent. Period. Right. That's all that.
Or maybe
it's not. It's not an inability to understand. No, they're just like it's just a prejudice. Right. They're expressing.
Yeah, and I do have to agree with you with that, though. I mean, people out in LA, everybody could. It's kind of like New York. Like, everybody has some place to be and something to do.
Yeah.
So the pace of it is drastically different than Dallas, which is why you say it's a lot slower.
It was more
calmer pace. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think it's like a meanness. I don't think it's.
It's almost like okay, especially like, for example, if you go order a coffee or something. They, like, for me, I like to take my time. I get there, I think about the coffee I want as I'm looking at all the names.
You just browse.
I'm just browsing around, and they just
you gonna order something? Or
yeah. So I come from a culture that is very, very slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And deliberate.
And slow and quiet.
Yeah.
In the way that now my voice has gone better. I'm speaking up. But before, it was just hard for me to adjust to the culture in LA, especially. But in Dallas was easier for me.
Yeah, people are more apt in Dallas to sort of reach out, or even honestly make eye contact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The East Coast is very much like like you described, fast paced, and I wouldn't describe it as meanness. It's more like indifference.
That's the right way. That's the positive way.
Okay. No, it's true. It's true. People just like it's like very.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But I noticed, and it sort of brings to mind something I almost had forgotten about when we moved out here.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't accustomed to people like I didn't know. Making eye contact and speaking, that kind of thing. Where I'm from, if somebody's looking at you, right, like intent, they're trying to start something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll never forget. I was in like an auto zone or something, and this white guy was looking at me, and I thought, "What the hell are you looking at?" I thought that there was this knee-jerk reaction, like this. What is this man? And I started getting all worked up. You know, you kind of tell yourself a story and you breathe life into it.
Right.
And the dude was the nicest guy. He invited me to his church. You know, after a conversation and everything, and I was like, "Oh man," I was thinking such horrible things about you. like a perfectly nice man.
I like how you see life. You know, like you just you looked at him, you have those feelings, and then he's nice, and you're like, "Oh, I was having wrong conversations."
Oh man, I felt like apologizing. He didn't know about it. I felt like apologizing. Like, I'm so sorry. I thought that I would like to punch you in the face, sir.
Yeah.
Really nice man.
Yeah, it's interesting cultures, how our different cultures can bring us together, but also if we don't know anything about it, it can literally cause problems.
Yeah, before
and
before
I like
you even have an interaction.
Yeah, and I like that you brought it out, because that was the main reason we started this culture. It's Umuco translates to culture. It translates to culture, and our goal was to because people get offended by things that they don't understand. And if we were aware that if you don't understand something, just ask or educate yourself about it, it might be in your favor. So mostly when we started this podcast was, for us to bring people from different cultures, different backgrounds, like two guys, you and that white guy at the parking lot. Was it a parking lot?
AutoZone.
Yeah, AutoZone.
It's like an auto zone.
Yeah, like starting those conversations, or people listening to these conversations and realize, wait a minute, I thought of this culture that it was offending to me, but that's just the way maybe they express their love, or they express different things, like you said about, eye contact. I had to learn about eye contact, because when I was asking for my visa to come here, I will ask questions like, if I'm in the US, what's the culture? Because we have different sign languages, I feel, or body languages.
Yeah.
And one of the main thing was the eye contact thing. In my culture, when you are talking to someone and you're looking at them right in the face, you are disrespectful.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so if my parents are talking to me, or if somebody respects and I'm just looking at them in the eye like this, that means I'm ready to,
confront them.
Confront them.
Trying to start something.
Yeah, and it's like you don't give them where you don't respect them. So I had to learn that here it actually means you're listening. Yeah. Because in my culture, when somebody's talking to you, you kind of make it a point to not fix your eyes in theirs.
So interesting. And something like that can be so wildly misinterpreted.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So I had to learn that. And then when I was here, I had to be able, and some people thought I was shy because sometimes I couldn't hold my eyes with a person. And then a few years later, I got used to it. But before, I would be talking to someone and I would just look down, or my words can't come out because I'm, distracted by
the intense eye contact.
And they would think I'm shy, but I wasn't.
Yeah, I think a lot of introverts in this country have that problem, like with sort of eye contact, sort of interpersonal reaction, because many introverts have such a rich internal life, that they don't think really much about how they're being perceived when they're interacting with people, and
I'm also an introvert, so maybe that played a part in it. Yeah, I guess.
double the effort.
I was gonna say, you gotta come in and going.
So before we let you go, should we ask him?
I was about to say verbatim. I was about to say the same thing. So I guess, to our listeners, to anybody who's watching, what message or what messages would you leave with them, with everything that you've learned and experienced? What kind of wisdom would you impart on them?
Yeah, it's a heavy question you saved for the last question.
Yeah.
Well, I'll share something that I've sort of spent a lot of time thinking about lately. Have either of you heard of Hannah Arendt?
No, I
I
don't.
think her last name is spelled Arendt.
No.
She is a like a Jewish German political theorist. A lot of people refer to her as a philosopher, but she avoided that term. I think it's because it was too passive for her. But she was active essentially from the 1920s through, I think she died in the 1970s, if I'm not mistaken. But her political awareness and her most important works were shaped during and after Hitler's rise to power.
Right.
And her most famous work is called Eichmann in Jerusalem. All right. And she tells a story about this fellow named Adolf Eichmann, who during the reign of the Third Reich, sort of known or referred to then and now as a desk murderer, right? He was somebody whose job it was to determine like who and how many people went to concentration camps. Right?
Oh, okay.
That was his job.
Wow,
right?
that's a horrible job.
And he was actually tried after the war ended, so brought to trial for crimes against humanity, understandably. And Eichmann in Jerusalem is about Hannah Arendt's sort of attempt to understand, like most of us would, the evil that was happening around her. And to her, she narrowly escaped with her life. People really wanted to make sense of the extraordinary atrocities that were committed against humanity.
Yeah.
And so she studied his motivations. And she was essentially she was surprised to conclude that she didn't think he was inherently evil. She sort of learned that he wasn't necessarily even politically motivated. He didn't necessarily have an axe to grind against Jewish people. He didn't really have any sort of political or anti-Semitic ideology that he was, nursing. What she found out, the reason why he was doing it was instrumental in the atrocities that occurred because he was trying to get a promotion, and so her sort of the phrase that she coined for the description of this guy who was essentially just a bureaucrat is the banality of evil. She writes about the banality of evil, which essentially is her description of someone who, wasn't especially intelligent or emotionally invested in his work, but just did it because it was his job, right? And that's kind of how evil happens, because it takes shape. It takes shape in the absence of a hierarchy of values. And I think we're seeing, obviously to a lesser degree, a sort of development of, an expansion of the banality of evil on American soil.
Right.
To be fair, the infrastructure has been in place for hundreds of years of inequity, inequality, brutality. If you think about all of our major institutions, they're all foundationally discriminatory. If you think about how our schools function and operate,
right?
How many kids get left behind. Obviously, our judicial system is deeply flawed. You think about our healthcare system, right? Every major institution in this country has inequity built into it. So I think if I could share a message with, anybody who would sort of, be willing to listen, is that we examine our hierarchy of values as a country and as individuals, because I think right now and for a very long time it's been deeply distorted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And as you were talking about Hitler's rise to power, I immediately, I'm sure you did too, kind of equated it to what's going on in our country as well. And that's just a fascinating thing about. It's not so much that there's a collection of these people who are equally as evil. It's a lot of times it's like one person
they're just driven by
who's
power.
driven, and then other people are just kind of like, I'm doing my jobs, but in doing so, they enable that.
The environment for those people to rise to power has to already be in place. And my fear is because so much of that is in place in this country, and because so many of us, there's this sort of absence of real values, right?
Right.
How Americans talk about God and country and guns. Guns always enter into conversation, right? God, so few of those people are Christ-like in their behavior, and country, their interpretation of what makes this country special, vastly different from mine. Like they certainly aren't in love with the Bill of Rights. You know what I mean? And then guns, like machines of death. They elevate them to this mythic sort of status in this country. So the structure is already in place. Was already in place, has been for hundreds of years for, a modern sort of, this sort of Trump figure who's not especially charismatic or intelligent or eloquent, doesn't really have any, and I don't mean that as an insult. No, it's like, but I just find it to be so true, right? Like, he's not. There's nothing particularly special about it. He's just someone who was enabled by the existence of this sort of
system.
The system. It's always about the system.
Wow.
But this system,
I don't know if that answers that question.
No, it does.
It does, and the systems are people, and I feel like we need to also call them out too, because the hierarchy and the system, it was created by people, and the people are not they're the ones who are putting it in place. They're the ones who are, it's not. It was not naturally born. It's not. It's not something that you can say, okay, this system is wrong. This is how we can fix it. It's just like finding the right people to even look at it. Look at it as though it's wrong. So I think what you're just saying, it just speaks so much to what we see in the world.
Yeah.
Because there are so many people, so many presidents around the world like Trump.
Right. So many people who are just waiting for an opportunity to take advantage of people who don't necessarily have any core moral belief system.
And that starts low, like in the jobs, like it starts in the managerial positions, and the person, it just happens everywhere in everyday's life. It's a culture that I guess we need to. It's not just a system; it's a culture too. And sometimes people if people are born into that kind of culture, they think it's the only way of living.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they don't know anything outside of that. It's normal for them.
It's your reality.
It's a
Like,
reality. It's like a religion. If you're born into religion,
exactly.
Right.
yeah, there's others, and then there's you. You know. But we're gonna do what we can. Hopefully, people will listen to your message, because that really, like, I don't mind.
It's truth. It
yeah.
resonates because it's true.
It is true.
It's like it's an immediate step that people can take to look into that, and then to call things out that don't serve everyone.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much, Andre.
Yeah. Thank you again.
It's been genuinely my pleasure. It's great to talk.
We're going to
with
take you
guys.
back to social media.
Yeah. Kicking and screaming, but I'm going back.
All right, welcome back, guys. Thank you for tuning into that episode. I'm not sure if it came across during the interview, but we were kind of blown away by what we learned and kind of the depth of the conversations that we were able to get into. Yeah, this was definitely a lot of lessons, especially for me, not coming from here. You know, like it's always wonderful for me to listen to people, and especially Black community in America, the experiences, and just try to relate and, you know, and tap into my own history. This was really incredible. Mm-hmm. He's really smart. He's read a lot of books. Yeah. It's, you know, you have to come prepared to talk with Andre. Like, he's very gracious. He's a very gracious conversational partner, but like I don't know, like I wasn't intimidated. That's not what I'm trying to say. No. It was just a wealth of knowledge that he willingly shares. Yeah. It's and he's an educator. I think that came across as well as we were like interviewing him, and it always happens with us, you know, when we interview people and they're so smart, and we're just like, oh my God, I'm learning at the same time. Yeah, which absolutely. Is always a treat. And so far, I mean, in season 2, we've been lucky enough to, I feel like, have that every single episode. Not that we didn't have it in season 1, but I don't know. If season 1, we're not that professional. That's the biggest thing. Yeah, we are more confident in what we're doing now, so I feel like we're able to take a little bit more away. Yeah, I can't wait for, you know, for what this podcast is gonna bring to life. Yeah. Because the more we do it, the more I learn, the more I get more encouraged to spread messages of love and hope and education and all of it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, folks, if you hadn't already, make sure to check out and show support to Andre's blog, Blaxplanation. He may not have updated it as of yet, but there's still a ton of great material there to read. But until next time, please stay tuned until the next episode. Oh yeah, and stay tuned, and don't forget to sign up on our platforms, our website, and newsletters. Oh, we now have a blog every other Friday. That's right. Yep. Almost forgot. Thank you for. Yeah. We now have a blog every other Friday on our website. That kind of recaps what we have learned so far in our own lives and maybe what's going on in the world, but it also highlights our upcoming guests. So if you want a little bit more insight into kind of what we're doing and how we operate, be sure to go on our website, www.umucolove.org, to find our blog and to keep us. Yeah, and more information, our YouTube channel, and it's, you know, we're doing it. We're hustling. Yes, we're hustling. This is also a long outro. Oh yeah. Okay, bye. Okay. Stay tuned, guys. Stay tuned.